Okay, good morning, everyone. Senate Judiciary. It's Tuesday, April 27th. Senator Sears is with us by phone, but not by video. So first up on the agenda today, I wanted to ask Senator Benning, we held open a vote on H89, agritourism. Rest of the committee was unanimous. Senator Benning.
Assuming that the vote is still open, Mr. Acting Chair, I would vote aye.
Great. And I believe Senator White is a reporter.
Yep.
So that's a 5-0-0 vote.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good thing it was. I've already turned it in.
Okay.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And at this point, we're going to turn to the House proposal of amendment on S45, which is the earned good time or the earned time bill. And they've come back with some relatively modest changes, which Bryn Hare will walk us through. And you want to share your screen, Bryn?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I will do that. So good morning, committee. For the record, Bryn Hare from Legislative Council. So I am here to talk about the House proposal of amendment to S45, which is the earned discharge from probation bill. And the House did do a strike all amendment. However, there are only two changes that they made to the Senate version of the bill. So I'm going to share my screen and just show you the House proposal of amendment with the two changes and highlight. So it's clear what is different. Just give me a moment. Okay. Can everybody
Yep.
see that? Okay. All right. So the bill, as I mentioned, is unchanged from the House version except for two things. And the first is the addition of Section 2. And Section 2 is the probation statute. So in the probation statute, Section 205 of Title 28, there's this language, existing language here, which is now in B2, that identifies that the victim of a listed crime has the right to request and receive information from the Department of Corrections. And the House version adds to that subsection a new subdivision here that requires the prosecutor's office at or before the sentencing hearing to inform the victim of the midpoint review process for probationers and to inform the victim that the defendant may be eligible under these statutes for an early discharge from probation. So the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions, I think that they were concerned about the victims being notified prior to the sentencing of a defendant about this midpoint review process so that they could be certain that victims would be able to weigh in on that and understand from the get-go that there may be an opportunity for a defendant to be released at the midpoint if they meet all of the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a new section. Now
That seems in line with what we were doing anyway.
Yep. Yes, that is correct. You also had a victim notification piece in the bill.
And can I just weigh in and ask a question about
Absolutely, Alice.
that? Can you just go back to the piece where that was, Bryn?
Sure. So I highlighted the section here, but it's really just B1. This is what's new right here.
So they are informed of that. Do they have a say before the judge? They may be informed, but do they have a say?
So I think that there are witnesses on the call that can weigh in about the procedure here, but because the prosecutor's office needs to inform the victim, I suspect that the victim would be able to convey their wishes to the prosecutor, who could then speak to that during the sentencing phase. But I will let other witnesses talk about the procedure.
Thank you.
In more detail.
We have a full complement. So once we're done with the walkthrough, we'll ask for comment.
Okay, so I'll move on to the second change. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the second change is really just a rewrite of the language that the Senate crafted. And you'll remember this language because there was quite a bit of work on it. So it's in section 4, and this is the section that deals with when the department is reviewing the probationers at their midpoint. And They have to, if you remember, they have to recommend them for discharge if they meet this criteria that's outlined in subdivision D1, A, B, and C.
Mhm.
So the criteria in C is that the probationer has completed those rehabilitative or risk reduction services that were required as a condition of their probation and that have a set and knowable duration at the outset. So you remember this committee spent quite a bit of time working on that language because you wanted it to apply just to those specific types of programming, those that had a finite duration that was known when they were assigned as a condition. So the wording here is just a little different. If you remember, the Senate version said any rehabilitative or risk reduction services, and they were concerned about the word any. They wanted it to be clear that it applied to all of those risk reduction or rehabilitative services that met those criteria. So they just reworded it to read that the commissioner can recommend a person for discharge if they've completed those rehabilitative or risk reduction services required as a condition that had a set and knowable duration at the outset. So I don't think that it changes the intent of the Senate language. Just think it was intended by the House to make it a little bit clearer.
Okay. Is
That's
that
it.
the extent of it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first of all, questions for Bryn on those from the committee. Okay, then of the witnesses, we have Judge Grierson here. We have Matt Valerio and Dale Crook, among others. Is there anybody who's got something to say to these changes or sees any potential hazard with them? Judge Grierson?
I don't, good morning. Thank you, Senator Baruth. And for the record, Brian Grierson, Chief Superior Judge, I don't have any comments on those sections. They won't have an impact on the court's procedures, but I'm certainly willing to answer any questions the committee may have about those sections. Senator Nitka did ask about the victim being able to comment or speak to the court at the time of sentencing. And of course, a victim does have a right to address the court at the time of sentencing, so that wouldn't alter it. This provision, Section B, allows or requires a state's attorney to make sure the victim understands the potential impact of earned time. And that responsibility falls to them. It's certainly possible that the victim doesn't agree with the plea agreement in general, or has a concern about earned good time. But if this bill goes through and the individual is entitled to good time, then the court can't take that away. I don't know if that
Okay,
addresses your concerns or not, Senator Nick.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
thank you, Judge Grierson.
You're welcome.
Dale Crook, anything you'd like to add from?
No, the department is, sorry, for the record, Dale Crook, Director of Field Services, Vermont Department of Corrections. The department is in support of the changes. I think it just adds some clarity and makes it more clear what the intent of the bill would be. So the department has no concerns.
Chris Fenno, there is an additional notification piece here that's to your liking.
It is. My only concern again is the workload for the state's attorney's offices and who that job falls to ensure that victims are notified.
Okay, fair enough. We don't have that I can see the state's attorneys represented, but I imagine they testified in the House. Matt Valerio, anything to add?
I really don't have anything to add.
Okay,
Mine
fair
is
enough.
good. Thank you.
Okay, so unless I hear from anyone else, given that the committee has no questions, Senator Sears, would you like us to take a vote? Senator Sears, are you with us? Okay, let's, we'll pause that until Senator Sears can be with us again. So let's move to our next item on the agenda, which is the Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics, H317. Bryn, is that you?
No, it's Eric.
It is.
I'm sorry, I finally unmuted. My
Okay.
problem was trying to figure out how to unmute on the phone when I've got my my directions, my Google Map.
Okay.
So great technology. I need a lesson in technology from a 12-year-old. I'm fine with the changes. I would love to see a vote to concur with the House proposal of amendment on S45. S45.
Okay, I am happy to call that vote, just to note that our rules require video, I believe. Isn't that right, Joe?
Right, and I won't be able to vote, but
Okay, so.
that's fine.
Okay, and Senator White, you had a question?
I'm moving it.
Oh, very good.
Second.
Second, is there any discussion? Okay, Peggy, can you call the roll on concurring with the House? on
Sure.
45?
Senator Benning,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Baruth.
Yes. And Senator Sears expressed support,
Right.
which will go unofficially into the record.
In abstention.
What was that, Dick?
In
In
abstention.
abstention.
In abstention, okay. Great, so if we go to H317, I am a little reluctant to do that. Oh, there's Eric.
Eric's here.
Eric, are you with us?
Senator Baruth, before you head on to the next bill, am I safe in assuming that whoever was the reporter of the bill originally is going to be reporting that concurrence on the floor?
Absolutely. Was that you, Joe?
I don't think so.
Okay, I think it was Senator Sears. And often the chair of the committee stands up to respond to the House, so
Okay.
that makes sense, unless we hear otherwise from him.
No, that's fine for Joe to do that. I would like that. If I could explain why he's on our agenda, no.
Dick, I think we had decided you would be the man.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay.
The racial disparities panel or bureau bill, I put on the agenda because we're closing down on Friday, will be our last formal day to meet. I'm hoping the House passes a bill. Assuming they do, we need to respond to it. And this was the opportunity to really take a look at some of the changes that Coach Christie went over with us last week when we went over the bill, and to get the committee to do, some thoughts on the bill and whether or not we should go forward or whatever. But that's why it's on the agenda. We don't have the bill yet. It's still in the House.
Okay.
Could I ask a question about that? Has it left the House committee and but it hasn't passed the floor, or what's the status of it?
Well, Representative Grad believes that the version that we went over would probably be the version that they send to the floor, but there's no guarantee, obviously. Whatever the House does, the House does.
Okay, so it hasn't even left the committee yet.
No, it has not.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
when do we respond to it? If, there may be committee members who would like to see changes, and we could talk about them based on whatever the discussion was last week. I know it's unusual, but, trying to deal with a bill that was introduced late in the session, House wanted to take the lead on it, and so that's why it's there.
Senator White, did you want to respond?
No, I have a lot of issues with it. So I'm not sure I would,
Yeah,
I-
I will say, Coach Christie's amendment really seemed to me to require a lot of thinking and a lot of discussion. So we are getting it late, but I understand the wisdom in us doing some spade work on it beforehand. So Eric, do you want to walk us through? I guess we're looking at the version of we're
It's on the
looking
committee page.
at the version that Coach Christie is proposing. Eric?
Yeah, I think that's the most recent iteration of the racial justice statistics proposal is that one. It's the same one that I walked both committees through during the joint meeting last week, but I'd be happy to kind of refresh everybody's recollection as to what the basics of it are, if that would be helpful.
That would be great. And I'm just wondering what common text for us to look at. Peggy?
I'm looking at draft 1.1. That's what's on the committee page.
Yes, that's right.
All right, so let's all make sure we have that.
It should say Christie amendment next to it.
No.
Yeah.
Refresh your committee page, Senator White. And
Oh.
Although I think, yeah, just
You mean
refresh
on
it.
not on the draft itself, it doesn't say that.
When I
It
posted
says it
it,
on the website, right?
yeah, it'll say draft 1.1 Christie amendment. on the
Okay,
web.
but it doesn't say it on this. I printed it out. So,
Okay, Eric, do you want to just give us a brief look at what they're doing here?
Yes, certainly. Eric Fitzpatrick with the Office of Legislative Counsel, here to talk with the committee about H 317, an act relating to establishing the Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics. The essence of the proposed change right now, which is conceptually the same as what the committee reviewed in the joint hearing last week. You recall that when the bill was introduced, and same with the companion bill in the Senate, the Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics was located within the Agency of Administration. So it was alongside the Office of Racial Equity. So there had been a lot of discussion, I think, amongst all the parties involved in this proposal as to what makes sense as to where to house the entity, where it makes the most sense for it to be situated. And I think that's an issue that's been discussed ongoing now. So the most recent proposal, the one that you're looking at right now from Representative Christie, proposes to not have the Bureau within the Agency of Administration anymore, but instead to have it within RDAP, the Racial Disparities in the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Systems Advisory Panel. Now, the RDAP panel is itself within the Attorney General's office, but the structure of it would be that the Racial Equity Panel would essentially be within RDAP. And you may also recall that in the bill as introduced, there was not only the statistics, Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics, which was responsible for actually collecting the data related to racial disparities in the justice systems, but it was overseen by an advisory panel that was responsible for making policy decisions based on the data that the Bureau collected, also responsible for communicating sort of between the Bureau and the legislature. So the proposal here is that instead of having that separate standalone advisory panel, there would be a body that had the similar function that acted as an oversight arm over the Bureau, and that body would be a subsection of RDAP. So instead of having an entirely separate bureaucratic entity created, you simply would have a subcommittee of RDAP that would that would be selected by RDAP itself, by the chair with the consent of the advice and consent of the other members. They would select this 5-member subcommittee that would have the same responsibilities that the advisory panel did have in the previous bill. In other words, they would oversee what the data collection folks are doing, that they would make policy recommendations, make decisions about what ought to be done, and then also have an annual reporting requirement to the legislature. So it would be this RDAP subcommittee that would have that role, reduce the amount of additional appointments that have to be made, reduce, in a sense, the bureaucratic separateness of it, because it would be just 5 existing members of RDAP who would serve this function. So that's one major change of the proposal. And the other one, so that's sort of the housing of it, but as well, the bill as introduced, you remember, when it created this Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics, it had, in addition to an executive director, it had 2 other full-time staff IT people who were located in the Bureau, who were basically full-time data collection people. Creates these staff positions so that all the data collection was being done by the Bureau itself. The proposal here, and this is another issue that has been discussed with the witnesses as the committees have taken testimony on this, is some of this data collection already being done by other entities? Is it, essentially repeating the resources? So in order to avoid doing that, the proposal here has the data collection being coordinated by the Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics Executive Director amongst the entities that are already doing it. So essentially, it provides that the Executive Director of the Bureau have a role to establish the coordination and collaboration between, I'm just going to read the organizations: Vermont Crime Research Group, Vermont Chief Performance Officer, Vermont Chief Data Officer, National Center on Restorative Justice, UVM, and any other entity that would be of assistance. So the idea is that these other entities are already involved in this data collection. Doesn't make sense to repeat that work that's already being done. So instead, the Bureau is tasked with sort of establishing this collaboration between those entities to make sure the data is organized and collected. Then the data is moved, as I mentioned earlier, communicated to the subcommittee of RDAP for purposes of analyzing it, determining what to do, make recommendations to the legislature if there's legislation that needs to be proposed, that sort of thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Were you about to say that's about it?
Yes, I was going to say those are the two changes, really.
Okay, I just have a general question. So if you're imagining what this amendment does, and so instead of housing it within the administration, it's attempting to place it slightly off to one side in RDAP, who would handle the administrative functions, the payroll and the HR legal work? And I'm thinking here of the State Board of Education was created in a certain sense outside of the purview of AOE, and it has some separate functions, but ultimately it leans on AOE for all of its administrative services. How would that work here? Is there an agency that would be providing that, or might we be asked at a later point to add in those services if not?
I believe, and I'm just pulling up the statute now, that there is an administrative position established within the Bureau. So some of those functions, sort of the day-to-day operating functions of the Bureau itself, I think the thought was that one administrative position would be sufficient to cover what needed to be done, at least initially. But in addition to that, I think that and I'm just pulling up the statute, I believe that there's some language in the RDAP statute that provides that they will get administrative support from the Attorney General's office. So to the extent that, not seeing it now, I thought I had seen it earlier, but I'll follow up on that.
I'm wondering if Senator Sears, are you looking to join in? Your phone is lighting up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't planning on joining you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I was just, your phone was lighting up as though you were trying to say something.
No, it was being foolish.
Okay.
It's going between the Google map and the feed. But I will say that, the questions you're asking are good ones, and that's, how do we work this through? Is it going to even be possible to work out the kinks in this? Assuming the House passes a bill.
Yep. Okay, so
I did find that sentence, by the way, just so you know, there is an existing, in addition to the administrative position established in the Bureau of Justice Statistics, there's also in the RDAP statute itself, it says the Office of Attorney General shall provide the panel with administrative and professional support. So there's that layer in addition to the specific person who's placed in the Bureau.
okay, and obviously when that was written and passed, the subject under discussion was just an advisory panel. If we expand it to include an actual bureau beneath it, then we'd need to go back to the AG's office and ask how comfortable they are continuing to supply that level of assistance. That's assuming that you went down the path of this amendment. Senator White, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have some just very basic questions about this. We have talked a lot in the state about not having appropriate racial and gender statistics. And my concern here is what we're doing is we're setting up one area in our criminal justice system to collect only racial data. It doesn't collect gender data, it's just racial data. And it also is only in this one area that we serve. And so what I'm concerned about is that we aren't collecting it in health, education, employment, housing, all of those other areas. And to me, and I know that Coach said the other day that this might act as a template for others, but do we want to really set up a separate bureau for health statistics and a separate bureau for education statistics? So I just have a basic concern about the concept of this to begin with. It's hard for me to talk about details because the concept itself doesn't make any sense to me. I believe that what we should be doing is figuring out what statistics we need to collect statewide, what it is that we're looking for, why we're collecting them, and how to collect them statewide in some kind of a standardized manner. I mean, I don't mean statewide, I mean in state government wide, in a standardized manner, and then figure out where is there a separate Bureau of Statistics that's set up, or is it something in ADS that's set up and agencies and departments feed into that and then they feed back? I don't know, but so it's hard for me to comment on any of the details because I just have a real concern about the whole concept. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. And so those concerns are things we'll have to talk about as this moves forward.
I think that I wanted to mention, if I could, Phil,
Yeah.
that we have to go back to the history of this. I mean, we're the ones that are guilty since we asked for this as part of justice reinvestment. We asked RDAP to look at ways, as I recall, to gather criminal justice and juvenile justice statistics so that they would be useful in trying to make decisions. And if you remember in the Justice Reinvestment Work Group report, there was frustration that the statistics weren't there. So I understand what Jeanette is saying, but I think what happened was RDAP, the group that looked into this, saw what Connecticut did and felt that that was an alternative to improve our record keeping. And there's so much interest in things like traffic stops, questions like why are so many persons of color incarcerated in Vermont as compared with the population itself. So those types of things we kind of asked, and this is what they came up with. So I hear what Jeanette's saying, but I just want to bring us back to what we were trying to accomplish.
Yep.
Yep.
And go ahead, Jeanette.
No, I agree with that. We asked for something and they gave us what we asked for. I'm just saying that now that we've kind of gone, that other things are percolating out there, like around the COVID and the health statistics, and in GovOps, we've been talking a lot about statistics in different areas. So that now that I'm just looking at this more broadly, RDAP did do what we asked them to do. I acknowledge that.
Yep. And speaking of RDAP, Eitan Nasreddin-Longo is with us and has turned his camera on, which I take as maybe an interest in joining the conversation.
Good morning, Senator Baruth and other senators. Thank you. For the record, Dr. Eitan Nasreddin-Longo, chair of the RDAP. One thing that I would note, given what Eric Fitzpatrick just read in the read through, is this amendment is based on what I perceive to be a serious misunderstanding of the report that the RDAP submitted in December of last year that is in fact the animating document for this bill. The data do not exist. That's just it. They do not exist across the board. It's patchy, it's here, it's not here. If you look at the report very carefully, there are two tables in there that were prepared by the crime research group that are very clear about what data do exist, what data don't exist, and to some extent what might need to happen in order to make them exist. So to base any decision about the structure of this body based on that assumption, that would be the assumption that the data are there and all that's required is collaboration, is in my opinion seriously flawed.
Mm-hmm.
The other assumption is that somehow a reduction in the number of people required to do this work is acceptable. Yes, we did put this report together with a subcommittee. The subcommittee met every week. Subcommittee sounds very dignified. What was really going on was somewhat less so. People were having to switch off their cameras during meetings to get lunch because it was the only time in their day that they could eat. They didn't want us to see them masticating during the meeting. I just want to be clear, we need experts, period. Experts, data experts. There are not people who have the free time and the expertise currently in state government to do this work, period. If there were, we would have identified them.
Okay, point taken.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you could respond to the general set of questions since Coach Christie, Representative Christie, put forward his amendment. We've been kicking around the idea of where this bureau would land. I have to say, my experience with the State Board of Education, which as an entity I like and I support, the people who work there are underpaid and underappreciated. They do wonderful work, but I did have, when I first became chair of education, I did have a problem with them because their view of their own purview was that it didn't exist in state government. It was essentially floating off to one side and that no one had oversight of what they were doing. And at least for me, that's a red flag. And anytime you're talking about government, American government, checks and balances are what we're about. So can you just speak to, if RDAP becomes the home, how would that independence work versus oversight and the ability, say, of the Agency of Administration, which was one of the other alternatives, to provide resources on a continuous basis, oversight, et cetera. So those two basic ideas, housing it in RDAP versus an agency, how do you work that out in your own mind?
There's a lot that needs to be discussed with the full panel. We're in the process of scheduling a special meeting right now that will happen before our regularly scheduled meeting. In fact, when I'm off this call, I need to work on that. I think it's hard for me to speak about that balance because I am not intensely familiar with something like the Agency of Education. I will say that I do feel like the RDAP has a great degree of independence. I don't say that just from a gut sense. I say that also from speaking with the Attorney General himself and how he views the body. I have often said, when I've had moments of needing direction, this is your panel, and he corrects me very vociferously. No, it's really not. It's under this office, but it is not my panel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are other people on the panel who take exception to that. I would certainly ask that you speak with Rebecca Turner about that.
Who is here?
Good. That's about as far as I feel comfortable going, I'm afraid, Senator, without consulting the whole body.
All right. Well, we actually have Rebecca Turner in the square next to you.
Oh, good.
So without objection, Rebecca Turner, would you like to wait? Oh, you're in your car as well. Are you driving?
She's muted.
Oh, you're muted. And I don't want to be responsible for an accident.
And I am in my car, and so I said, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Are you moving or stationary?
No, I am moving, so I am just going to listen in.
Okay, I'd call me crazy. I'd rather not take testimony from moving witnesses because I will be to blame if there's an accident. So
no,
could we ask this, Ms. Turner? Could you give us either via email or if we schedule you for another time, could you respond to what Dr. Nasreddin Longo just said?
Of course, I'm happy to do that. I'm also will be sitting to listen in, but I'll be stopping in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Or so, and I can check in if you are still there.
Yeah, great.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Once you've stopped, just let us know.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Committee members, other questions for Eric or Dr. Nasreddin Longo? And if not, are there any of the other, Doctor, you'd like to?
I had one thought about what Senator White's concerns are, and I think that those are very good points. I would also remind everyone that we spoke last week in a discussion about the idea of this being a body that started in a certain way and perhaps migrated. that it might start under the aegis of RDAP and might at a certain point migrate. I think that it may well be that this body can start in this way as focusing on data from the criminal and juvenile justice system, but I don't see any reason why it can't be expanded later to include a much broader collection of data when and if it's decided that this body, as has already been discussed, moves out of RDAP and into a different area.
Senator Nitka, you had your hand up, I think.
I was just wondering, how does Susanna Davis's office, that role that she has, come into play with this? I mean, is she answering in some ways to two groups now? In other words, the administration plus this new bureau. I'm just wondering how all that interfaces.
That is a good question because she's the executive director. So I suppose a quick look at it might say, why isn't the bureau being lodged in that shop and consolidating? Dr. Nasreddin Longo, any thoughts on that?
I'm repeating, or rather paraphrasing things that have been said to me, and I'm not going to get them either as accurately or as eloquently as they were related to me initially. I do know that Director Davis had some very serious concerns about her own independence, given how she was created in the executive under the governor and then under the agency of administration. She was, I mean, initially it was a part of the conversation. It still is within the RDAP. There are members who feel, as far as I know, still feel that the body should be located there. She herself had some doubts that if we really wanted the kind of independence of which we were speaking, the sort where with a stroke of a pen, things are simply canceled by executive order, her office may not be the place that's best suited.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alice, is that
Well,
does that answer your question?
it doesn't. I would just make another comment. I think being in the administration, she perhaps has more. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Dr. Nasreddin, but she, it seems like maybe she has more influence in that, being in that office, although I'm hearing what you're saying, than she would be apart from it. I don't know. I mean, I think it's something that needs to be figured out carefully.
And it's a good question. I mean, under the Trump administration, not to put too fine a point on it, we did see attempts in the executive branch to alter data, to cancel data collection, to scrub websites. So it's a real live concern.
Yeah.
But I would say that I can see why some members of the RDAP panel support placing it there, because it seems logically to make a certain sense. Senator Benning, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, actually, you were just articulating a thought that popped into my head. Doctor, I'm intensely curious, frankly. Are there members of RDAP who feel that if this entity were placed under the wing of the administration, that data collection could somehow be either misinterpreted or not collected properly or biased? Or I'm just trying to get a sense for what happens. Yes is the answer? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and without, I don't want to seem obsessed, but going back to the State Board of Education and the struggle that my committee had with them at one point, they had a similar mindset where they were concerned that they were going to be directed by the administration or thwarted by the administration or by the legislature. And so they wanted to be considered freestanding and outside of oversight of anyone. And I had actual conversations where the co-chairs of that board told me that that was the case, that they were not subject to oversight by either the governor or the legislature. And that was the point at which, you know, we wound up passing legislation to make that oversight clear. So my own concern is I appreciate the concerns about independence, but there's a countervailing concern that, you know, you wind up with a misunderstanding about, you know, interference and oversight. And I think oversight is something we all support. Interference is something we all want to prevent.
Right.
Just don't want to leave you hanging out there, Philip, as the only one with that concern. I was on your committee at the time.
Right.
And the overall thought of the Agency of Education, or I'm sorry, the Board of Education, going off on its own without any way for the legislature to somehow say, wait a minute, that wasn't the intent, is concerning for them. And I'm going through that same thought process here, but I just think it's important that everybody airs their mutual understanding and concerns.
Senator White.
So I will also back you up on the State Board of Education issue, which is why the Boards and Commissions Summer Study Committee eliminated the State Board of Education in our proposed bill 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I understand that we need to have whoever is, I'm not sure that that I understand the difference between collecting the data and analyzing the data. And I think that we have to have somebody, we have to determine, and I'm going back to my kind of broader than just the justice system. We have to have somebody, we have to determine what data it is we want to collect. And those agencies and that are responsible for that data have to collect the data and forward it to somebody. And then that somebody, it seems to me, kind of collects it, collates it, puts it together, maybe doesn't interpret it, or maybe does interpret it. And it seems to me that that's where you need the independence, is in the body that does the collating and the putting it together in a different way to present to lawmakers and the administration on how to use it for deciding policies and procedures. And so I wonder, if we really wanted independence in that, why wouldn't we contract with somebody like the University of Vermont? They have statisticians and researchers and who could, if we tell them what to collect and they collate it and collect it, but the collection is done by, in this system, it would be done by the courts, it would be done by law enforcement, it would be done by all of those people, and we tell them what to collect and what to report. Does that make any sense at all?
Doctor, I don't know if I'm remembering wrong, but it seems to me that when we had the joint hearing, wasn't UVM considered at one point as a location?
Yes, absolutely. The National Center for Restorative Justice, and that was Dr. Abigail Crocker, other people that I believe you've heard from would be the contact people. Professor Sand at VLS, they would be the people to speak to about that. That was very much another idea.
Okay. So I think, Alice, was that a hand or was that a person?
It was a wave to a person.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right. So if I could, let me just ask, we have other people. Rebecca Turner, I think, is waiting until she gets to a safe spot, but Among the other people on the call, is there anybody who'd like to join the discussion? Okay, hearing none. I think oops. Okay, Rebecca Turner, have you just parked?
I have just parked, and thank you. Good morning, everyone. I wasn't expecting to, I didn't think there was testimony this morning, and I'm getting my vaccine. I couldn't miss my vaccine this morning. So thanks for bearing with me. No, I am stopped, and I'm not sure if this camera is going to work, but I can shut off the camera as well. But can you hear me?
We can hear you.
And
Okay,
see
great.
you.
Oh, good.
And by the
did
way,
hear,
you do have a Fifth Amendment right to not answer the acting chair's questions regarding whether you're moving or not.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that, Senator Benning. So the questions in terms of, and I'm not sure if Dr. Nesreddin Longo addressed Senator White's questions about, or interest really, what I heard was just that this is something we should be doing across so many different sectors to collect so much information, and that this report's recommendations for collecting data is too limited in terms of focusing just on race. And I just wanted, again, I'm not sure if Dr. Nesreddin Longo responded to this already, but to Senator White's concern, it is true there isn't specific data collection points relating to what you talked about, certainly, because the focus was on the criminal juvenile justice system, but that it also wasn't so limited as to race data. And I think the current bill, the language there captures it in the sense of demographics. But certainly it was the panel's desire to capture more than just race and ethnicity. We wanted gender, we wanted age and others. And so that was contemplated. In fact, one of the points that have been made through that process of building this report, as well as in discussions of the report at the two committees, judiciary committees, has been the recognition that this is much bigger than a mere racial data collection bill as is currently drafted. So I just wanted to point that out. The second, which is that I understand Representative Christie's proposal is effectively an interim measure. And that I wanted to stress because I haven't heard that be recognized. And I think that as an interim measure, recognizing that this is even collecting and focusing on this bit, certainly within the panel, there was a recognition of how huge this project was. And our report suggested and highlighted certain data collection points we thought should be given priority. And certainly many of the data collection requests made it in the current bill, but just know that RDAP identified even a particular priority data collection group within. Again, recognizing how big this could be, well, is from the initial get-go, which is this point. And I appreciate the committee recognizing sort of the magnitude of where and how to do all of this. As Dr. Nesreddin Longo pointed out, and certainly the subcommittee working on this project recognized quickly after consulting with folks in Connecticut and hearing how they got their system up and out the first year after their legislation took effect. There were data experts who helped. There was a focus on particular and finite number of questions. They didn't try to go big quickly, and they learned from that experience and sort of reported back. And so I appreciate Representative Christie's sort of what I saw as an interim measure, suggesting a subcommittee within RDAP to be that, I think, initial out of the gate kind of oversight entity, but not necessarily where it should be and permanently. And just responding to you, Senator Baruch, in terms of your concerns as to on one level, ensuring there's capacity support for the amount of work that's being requested by this bureau, right? For one, as a member of the panel,
Oh, we got a frozen feed. Rebecca Turner, we've lost your feed. So we will move on, and when you come back, we'll pick up with you again. Peggy, are you there?
Yes,
I'm wondering if you could email David Scher or someone in the AG's office to see if they have comments on this, because I think it does draw in their office in terms, at least the implication is that they would be providing
sure.
administrative support.
He
And
had emailed me yesterday and said he didn't have any comment on either of the bills, but let me reach out to him again.
I think it would be good to
Sure.
just ask the question face to face if he's available.
Yep, I'll email him right now.
So we've lost Rebecca Turner completely at this point. So the other thing that we've got facing us is the procedural questions. So this is still in the House, still in committee. We are coming up on ending morning committees here. So I just wanted to frame what some of the concerns I'm hearing. You know, what this does is extremely ambitious in the sense that it's actually building government. So it's creating a bureau, and that's not something that we do quickly or lightly, creating a department, an agency, a bureau, because it's meant to endure in government. And so I think it's worth taking the extra time to think through what might be potential complications. So, you know, to speak honestly about it from my point of view, we're at the very end of our committee hearing time, and we won't even get the bill until we're done, I think, with hearings for this year. This isn't the sort of thing, I wouldn't think, that we could quickly have a couple of meetings with the House offline and agree, again, because it's building a bureau with permanent employees, permanent charge, that at least right now has a sort of tenuous connection to the rest of government. So I think Senator Sears is committed to having a robust discussion, and he hasn't closed off the possibility that we could agree on something with the House. I just want to, if I could, manage expectations a little bit by saying that we're at the very end of our process before we adjourn. And this has made it a long way, but it still seems, I mean, just the fact that it hasn't made it to the Senate yet speaks to what I'm saying. I see we have David Scher now. Senator Nitka.
I'm just wondering also, in terms of where I think we need some testimony is, you know, this is a lot of data that somebody has to put it together in order for it to be collected from these various places. And I'm looking just at a couple of these here, and one would need to know, do they have the time and staff to gather all this data, which might not be in a computer someplace that was easily searchable, to feed it into this system? I'm thinking of short-staffed places like the Defender General's office, you know, and those people out there, and how they would need to gather the data like a desk review in order to feed it in. And I think we need to know, do they have the ability in terms of staff to do it?
Mm-hmm.
I think it needs to be looked at.
Mm-hmm. David Scher, thanks for joining us on such short notice. Just to catch you up, we've been discussing Representative Christie's amendment And the AG's office came into the discussion when we went back to the RDAP's enabling statute. And there's a sentence which places it sort of in the purview of the AG's office for administrative help and other things. So the speculation was, if Representative Christie's amendment passed and this bureau was lodged in the RDAP panel, in essence, it's also adding to the administrative work that your office might be called upon for. So I thought it was best if you speak directly to that.
Thank you, Senator. And I have been following along on YouTube, so I've been watching the discussion. I appreciate the discussion here today. Confining my remarks to that, I've already testified, I believe, to one of the sessions where this committee was also involved on the larger questions, but just speaking about that administrative issue and the AG's office, I do think it would only be workable if, in fact, the position that's contemplated in the bill is funded and created in order to handle that administrative burden. I really don't think we would have the capacity to assist the panel if it were also to become an umbrella for this data gathering operation. That would be a much bigger job. We're talking about well, again, it depends on how it all comes out, but we're talking about multiple FTEs. And right now already, I would not say the administrative burden is huge for handling the current panel's needs in that respect, but it is real. It is time. It is also funding that comes out of the AG's budget in terms of per diems and so forth, which again, I want to be clear, we are fine with. We have the capacity to do that. But if this were to become a much bigger operation, the positions that are contemplated in the bill would be necessary for this to be able to be executed in a way that would actually be workable and produce the results that we're hoping to see happen from this type of bureau.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Any questions from the committee for David? Okay, I appreciate that. Oh, go ahead, Senator White.
No, this isn't for David, though. This is a follow-up on what Alice was talking about the ability to collect data.
Yeah.
And I don't know about these other areas. I do know that in law enforcement in the past, it wasn't standardized the way they collected data. And so the data that was actually, the statistics that were actually used could be slightly meaningless because there wasn't a consistency across systems. And I know that law enforcement has been working very hard to come up with consistent way of collecting all of this data. And my understanding is that it will help because all of the data collection systems now, or the reporting systems, are going to Valcor instead of having two different systems. But I am not sure if in the other areas here, like in the schools, do all the schools have a standardized way of collecting all the data and reporting it so that it is able to be compared with, to be put into some kind of a system. I fear that before we know that there's a standardized collection system or reporting system, not collecting, reporting system, that it's anyway, that's just a fear that I have. It was just a follow-up on Alice's comment about whether they had the ability to do it.
Yeah. And then there's the perennial problem. You mentioned education, and that's where I always experienced it, where we would call for data collection in statute and districts wouldn't provide it. Same has been true with law enforcement agencies over the years. We've called for collection and they haven't provided it for a series of reasons. Some, I think, in good faith, some, recalcitrance. But I think your question is a good one. I would pair it with the question I asked at our joint hearing, which is, if this bill calls for, and it does, a very extensive data set that we're looking to collect, where is the lever to make sure that that's provided. So we did pass in 2019, 2 years ago now, a piece of law that said if you don't provide your traffic stop data, you can't get government grants. And it was a very small piece of language, but it was a big lever to put into what had been a perennial problem for Mark Hughes's group, among others, was constantly finding that that data was not available or provided. So I think we've identified at least, some areas of further study here, and that's to the good. Dr. Nasreddin Longo, do you want to respond to anything that you heard?
Yeah, I just want to point out that, again, there is a drawing I keep going back to in the report that we submitted in December that is, I believe, on page 25. I don't have it in front of me. That shows the data flows between the systems as they existed in the criminal and juvenile justice systems in September of last year. It is of staggering complexity. The idea that this is not simple. Again, this is why we want the experts. I was told on several occasions by different people within state government, because my first response, not so much as the chair, but as a member of the RDAP, was, well, why don't we just get systems that all can talk to each other? And they looked at me like, you poor ignorant fool. What are you thinking? Do you have any idea of how many $1 million we're talking here? Literally multi-millions dollars in order to get systems that speak to one another, which is why I think in the end we came up with, there are people who do this, who actually get systems that don't talk to each other to talk to each other. And that's the idea of the data experts. They're not merely analysts. They're, in a certain sense, translators as well. The other idea that I wanted to put out is the idea of the advisory panel was also not so much to standardize the data, because that's obviously going to be quite a task, again, for experts. It was also because we felt that stakeholder input needed to be there to talk about what data are important as well, that the stakeholders needed to be involved in this conversation. And that was another important point of the advisory panel to the Bureau. And I just wanted to put that in there into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So committee, anything anybody else wants to add while we're on this topic? Senator Bennett.
I'd just like to kick in, since our committee has kind of taken it on the chin lately with some of the things we've said and how it's interpreted in the press. I want to make very clear for the record, we are not in any way, shape, or form trying to kill this thought process. And Dr. Nasreddin Longo, you've actually done exactly what we had hoped you would. And I agree with you completely that we need expertise in this area. Unfortunately, the successful work you have done have opened up other doors of inquiry that have us all scratching our heads, because, as you've said, millions of dollars are being spent here, but when you bring in housing questions, health questions, and the data collection that needs to be coordinated in those areas, this legislature is making tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of decisions, and having that data collected appropriately, analyzed in such a way that we can make intelligent decisions is all part of the process that we're now sitting here talking about. I just didn't want to leave it with anybody that we are somehow, as a result of these questions and thoughts, trying to stall or kill this attempt in any way, shape, or form. So thanks for coming and doing a good job.
Yeah, good point, Senator Benning. And I know Senator Sears is committed to this area. We've been working on it as a committee. We will continue to work on it. You know, my point about the timeline is another way of saying that we have a biennium to work in. Nobody's killing anything in the first year of a biennium. You're saying some things can move forward because they're relatively not as complex, and other things might need a little more study. So we won't even have the bill until probably next week. So at that point, it'll be clear what we can and can't do. So committee, I think that pretty much concludes. Oh, go ahead, Senator White.
Well, I was going to say that since the bill, I was going to agree with your timeline, and since we haven't gotten the bill and we're going to be shut down as of Friday, and the ability for us to meet as a committee after that is very minimal because 3 of you are on appropriations, and the point of shutting us down is so the appropriations can meet all day in conference committees. So.
And what seat was it again? 301, I believe.
Senator Sears, if it's all right with you, we have Dawn Ellis coming at 11:45 for her Human Rights Commission appointment. So I believe we've finished the discussion.
Can you hear me? I just wanted to comment on a couple of things now that I've stopped driving.
Yeah.
By the way, I was on sync all the way over, so I was not, I was talking and not driving. Well, I was driving, but I was talking, but not I was hands-free. I don't need to explain that because, as Senator Benning pointed out, the press is really watching us closely. And I think we have to make a good effort attempt to deal with this bill should it come over from the House, and hopefully this year. Now, whether we're able to or not, the most important thing is to get it right. And I worry sometimes if you rush things, you don't get it right. And I think the good doctor and others have pointed out some of the concerns with the sections that in the redraft that we just went through. So I'm perfectly comfortable with the direction the committee's going, but we never say never. There's always opportunities. So if you wanted to take a break till 11:45, that's fine with me. I'll stick around.
Okay, that was the thought. So thank you, Dr. Nesreddin Longo. And committee, without objection, will take a break until just a few minutes before 11:45. So we're all in place and Dawn Ellis is here, and then we'll consider her nomination. Her bio got mailed out to everybody. It's not long, but